protecting and defending the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. A little more Dennis Kuchinich. Go get him, Dennis.
Bombs are falling, people are dying, but it's not a war. That's what the president and his lawyers said. Here now is someone who vehemently disagrees with that idea. He's been fighting to end all of America's unconstitutional wars. Ohio Democratic Congressman Dennis Kuchinich. Congressman Kuchinich, welcome here. You and I have long agreed on the role of Congress under the Constitution, and it's crystal clear. Congress shall declare war. It's not a responsibility for the president. It's not even in the same section of the Constitution that enumerates the president's powers. And since you've been making this argument, you've gotten some support from people like Ron Paul and some other Republican libertarians. Have you gotten support from any more Democrats?
Yes, there are many Democrats who are beginning to understand the necessity of speaking out against the president's assumption of powers that rightfully belong to Congress under the Constitution. And I think we'll continue to see more and more people speaking out.
Where will this go, Congressman Kuchinich? Will you, for example, offer and debate on the floor of the House a resolution to compel the president to get the military out of Libya? Will you offer and debate on the floor of the House an amendment to the War Powers Act to make it crystal clear? You and I think it already is crystal clear, but apparently the president and his lawyers don't. Stated differently, what is the Congress going to do besides sit there like a potted plant and let presidents from George Bush and Barack Obama and even their predecessors fight whatever wars they want?
Well, you know, we need to do a number of things. Legislatively, we can move forward to attempt to cut off funds. I've proposed an amendment that would do that. We need to look at what we can do to change the War Powers Act. You know, essentially, the War Powers Act was, I think, an unconstitutional ceding of congressional power, which gave the president more authority in matters of war and peace than the founders intended. There's a discussion of legal action going on right now to see if we might have any recourse in that way.
I honestly would argue to you that there needs to be more intellectual honesty by people like you. Charlie Rangel, your colleague, who is a congressman from here in New York City, sat here and said to me, well, the reason we let the president get away with it is because we like him and we like the other things that the president does. I mean, most respectfully, that's not a basis to allow the president to start a war and to cause human death because you like him as a person or you like his domestic policy. The Congress can no longer look the other way, or this president and future presidents will claim this Libyan thing as a precedent to do it again.
You are absolutely right, Judge. And this isn't about whether you like President Obama or not. It's not whether you like Democrats or Republicans. It's about whether or not you love the Constitution of the United States. And as you stated at the beginning of this segment, the administration trying to claim this is not a war, just fix on that thought for a second. 2,000-pound bombs, dozens of them dropped. Maybe 200 Tomahawk missiles. We've got jet fighters, bombers. We've got CIA on the ground. And they're saying it's not a war. We have to challenge the type of thinking that would try to assert that to the American people. It is absolutely Orwellian. And if that's the kind of thinking that's behind this war, then Congress must reclaim the power that the founders rightfully placed in Congress to make the determination as to whether we go to war or not, because if we don't, as you say, look, they can use this kind of logic to take us anywhere.
Right.
We better stand on the Constitution.
All right. Now I want to discuss something before you go that we are likely to disagree on. And that's the president's speech earlier today, where he said the same president who signed into law an extension of the Bush-era tax cuts. I know you voted against it, and I know in his heart of hearts he didn't want it, but he signed it into law, now says basically that was a mistake, and people making more than $250,000 a year should pay more. What kind of sense, Congressman Kuchinich, does it make to tax people who invest their money and who create jobs to take more money from them in a deep recession like we're in today?
Well, it's about, I think, inevitably, it's about trying to get more money into the economy and get people to spend more. And the way that you do is to have more people who are working. And I think the emphasis has to be on job creation. And I'm hopeful that the White House is going to be more involved in that. And you know, you and I may disagree on this,
Yeah,
but I don't think you can just leave it
here's
to
my
the private
argument.
sector.
The government consumes wealth. Private investment produces wealth. If you take $1 away from somebody that makes $250,000 a year, that's $1 less that they can invest or put in their business. If you give that to the government, it's gone. If you put it into a business, it might create more wealth. Don't you accept that argument?
Well, you have to look at how government's spending money. If government's spending money on war, if government's spending money on massive tax cuts, if government is looking the other way while a trade deficit grows to outer space, then you have a reason to question the role of government in the economy. On the other hand, government can do productive things. Government can rebuild America's infrastructure. We have over $3 trillion in projects that need to be accomplished. We could put America back to work. And you can't rely only on the private sector to do that. You know that the private sector has actually made a lot of money and saw stocks go up as a result of shedding millions of workers. We've got to take an economy in consideration that balances private and public interest.
I wish we had more time, but we don't. We'll have you back again. Congressman Dennis Kuchinich on the Constitution and the economy. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Judge.
Are you learning now? Because if you look at the countries that don't have a Bill of Rights, if you look at the countries that don't have a constitution and a rule of law, do you want a tyranny? Do you know how tyrannies start? Didn't Hitler attack people based on lies? Wasn't Poland attacked because of a false flag event in the town of Galloway, where the Polish people supposedly attacked a German radio station? Didn't Hitler come to power because of, or get his enabling acts because of what was known as the Reichstag fires, when his capital was burned? Isn't that just like 9/11? Hey, and for you homeworkers, because I know that some of my viewers will actually take the time and do the homework, I want you to type in the 3 words, Prescott, Bush, Nazi. Then maybe the other viewers, when they talk to them, when they go down to Steve's Deli or whatever and stuff, and they talk, you know, and they go down to Rogers to get their haircut, or they go to the police station and talk to the police, go, gee, I didn't know that, you know, George Bush's grandfather had his assets frozen in 1942 for trading with the enemy. He was a frickin' Nazi banker. Brown Brothers Harriman and Union Bank. Maybe those Sharon viewers need to know the truth. Maybe the truth is like fresh air. It's like oxygen. Maybe it's like fluoride-free water. Wouldn't that be good? Okay, so anyway, let's go a little bit. We're going to go over to England now. We got 2 England things for you. One is I want you to listen to George Galloway. He's being interviewed just to see a perspective of a man who maybe thinks.
Duty to stop a humanitarian crisis from unfolding. Do you agree with him?
Well, it's the double standards that get me. There's more people being gunned down, innocent protesters in Yemen, for example. And no one would dream of invading or imposing a no-fly zone on Yemen because Yemen doesn't have oil. It's so transparently an attempt to protect British companies and other Western companies' massive investments in Libya that it is discredited in the Arab world. I saw your package saying there are Arab representatives at this meeting. Who are these Arab representatives? They can't even name themselves or the countries that they come from.
But we know that the Arab League came out publicly and backed the UN resolution.
But the Arab League is a collection of dictatorships.
So we shouldn't be dealing with Arab nations, is what you're saying?
No, but don't pray them in aid of an operation that's supposed to be standing up for human rights and democracy. The Arab League, without exception, is a collection of puppet presidents, corrupt kings, every one of them a dictator, every one of them now currently shooting their own people who are demonstrating for
Well, that's
democracy.
right, but what's the alternative? Do we stand by and watch Colonel
Well, we are
Gaddafi
standing
killing
by,
his people?
but we are standing by
we're preparing
watching.
to attack.
We're standing by watching the Yemen president killing his people. We're standing by watching the Bahrain king killing his people. So what's the difference between them and Libya? Everyone watching this knows the difference is a dirty little 3-letter word called oil. So let's not pretend it's about anything.
But Libya only produces 2% of the world's oil. It's not a big deal.
BP has £15 billion worth of investments, £1 billion worth of investments in Libya. So don't pretend it's not a big deal. The truth is that we're not intervening in these other revolutions, but we are intervening in this for our own selfish interests. Now, that has 2 consequences. First of all, it generates more hatred and enmity against us around the world, and we will see that, believe me. Gaddafi, brute, armed brute, and buttressed brute by us and other Western countries, is not going to be any kind of blancmange. This is going to be a hotly contested military contest, and it will be contested not just in Libya. We're generating hatred for ourselves, terrorism, terrorist attacks all over the world against our interests. Why? For the oil companies?
So you think that will happen? Because
Definitely.
we have had threats from
Definitely.
Gaddafi's spokesman this morning.
Gaddafi has a long
if you
record.
interfere.
He has a long record of being involved in international terrorism. Everybody should try to remember that. He has a long record of funding terrorist organizations, and he'll do it again.
Another reason to intervene in the country, some would say.
But he'd only be doing it because we're attacking him. Mr. Blair and his grisly embrace of Gaddafi in the desert, which I hope people will endlessly replay in their minds. Some of us said that this would come to this, and it has. He brought Gaddafi in from the cold, didn't he? So Gaddafi was now just another Arab dictator. But if we start bombing and shelling and threatening to invade his country, you can be sure he'll fight back.
So is that a reason not to do it? Because
Yes,
we
of
fear
course it is.
retribution?
Well, why are we doing it, Anna? We're a country that can't even pay our bills. We're almost bankrupt. We're laying off hundreds of thousands of people. We can't keep our pensioners warm in the winter. How come we've got money to go to war after war after war in the interests of oil companies and arms companies? That's what people in Britain are asking themselves this morning.
So would you say there are any circumstances that would justify any military intervention, or
Yes.
there should be no military intervention anywhere?
No, I'm not a pacifist. If our interests are threatened, I'll be the first at the recruiting office to defend our country and our justifiable interests. But they're not in this case. And if the neighbours of Libya are concerned about the turmoil that's being created by this dictatorship in their region, Tunisia and Egypt are perfectly entitled to take action to defend themselves, as Vietnam was, for example, against Pol Pot in Cambodia. But the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and the former colonial powers in the Arab world have absolutely no right to enter into Libyan internal affairs at all. So my solution is let the Arabs sort this matter out. But British men and women and taxes being used to put one group of people in Libya in power rather than another, no thanks.
George Galloway, thank you for coming in and sharing your views with us.
Thank you.
Rather interesting, and I love the accent. And with that, we're going to go to Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage, what a guy. Something for you to listen to, because you know what? The truth, freedom, it's a good thing.
So just absolutely amazing. And to break this down from the European Union perspective, on the heels of Barack Obama's speech, the Washington Post hailing Obama for basically quietly initiating the rebels and giving them the green light. British SAS on the ground, we now learn, for over a month. It is confirmed 2,200 Marines preparing to ground invade. But it's not a war, it's kinetic military action. And if it's a ground invasion, it's part of a humanitarian assistance. So this is not a war, Nigel Farage, is it?
I'm afraid it could well be a war. You know, we've started something here. We've no idea where it's going to end. I mean, this idea that Gaddafi's a bad man. Look, Gaddafi's been a bad man for 42 years. But as you quite rightly say, 6 years ago, Mr. Blair went and hugged him, and Mr. Berlusconi's been to meet him as well, and our British Commissioner in Europe, Peter Mandelson, went pheasant shooting with his son. I mean, we welcomed this guy in to the fold. We treated him as a friend and an ally, and as recently as December, the President of the European Union was there, you know, holding hands and being all matey with him. And now we're being told, and Herman Van Rompuy and the British government and the French government are saying, this is all about regime change. We've got to get rid of Gaddafi, and we are actively, militarily, supporting the rebels without having had a clue from the start who the rebels are or what their motivations are. Now, if this is for humanitarian reasons, who is to say that if the rebels get to Tripoli, that they won't massacre Gaddafi's people? I mean, I just think we've got into something here. We haven't thought it through. It's not part of a bigger North African and Middle East strategy, and I seriously regret our actions so far.